Hello, this is Dana and welcome to my channel, The Orchid Hut. Thank you for taking some of your time today to watch one of my orchid videos. This video is going to be about the aerial roots on Phalaenopsis orchids. Oftentimes, many growers have questions about how are these roots different? How should they be treated? What can be done with them? And I want to share with you some of my experience dealing with Phalaenopsis aerial roots, and hopefully some of what I share will help you in the future with your own Phalaenopsis orchid. So the place that we're going to start with this discussion is thinking about Phalaenopsis species in the wild. You know, if you think about that situation, none of those orchids are in pots. Their roots are free and growing in all directions, and maybe are supporting the plant by just attaching to the side of a tree. But the roots are not buried in the wild. So as we have hybridized Phalaenopsis orchids for the home, we have actually forced a part of their root system to adapt to growing inside of a pot with media. So the first thing to realize is that because we have done that, the Phalaenopsis roots that are inside the pot have adapted themselves to different conditions than the aerial roots that grow above the media. And that difference is what causes some of the other things that happen with the aerial roots. So let's first start with my largest Phalaenopsis orchid. I'll move some of these others out of the way. And this particular Phalaenopsis does not produce aerial roots all that much. That's just its nature, and it's not right or wrong, it's just the way that it is. So this gigantic orchid has one aerial root, and right now it looks like it may be producing another one right here, but in general this orchid doesn't really make that many aerial roots. If you look inside the pot though, you can see a really good example of how the roots are pushing to the edge of the pot. They're looking to be free, they're looking to be, out in the open, because that's how orchids grow in the wild. And when you repot Phalaenopsis orchid, this is the reason why you don't typically find a lot of roots directly under the axis of the plant. So this is one example of how Phalaenopsis can be. Now let's look at another example. This again is a Phalaenopsis that has, one aerial root, and it's really not even pushing out any others. Its roots inside the pot are fine, but again they are pushing to the outer edges. And then if we take another example, this Phalaenopsis has a tendency to produce more aerial roots. And this is just the way the orchid is. It has a good root system down inside the pot, but it also likes to produce the aerial roots, very long ones coming in all directions. You can see a little one coming right there, more towards the top of the plant. So this kind of takes us to the next question that a lot of people have about misting aerial roots. Well, the answer is maybe. If the circumstances are really, really perfect, you can mist the aerial roots and not do any harm. So let me give you what those conditions are. If the weather is warm, if the day lengths are long, if it's a sunny day, and you can mist very, very early in the morning, but you want to make sure not to overmist. You don't ever want droplets to collect on the surface of the leaf that could run down into the leaf joints and certainly not into the crown of the plant. So yes, you can mist the roots, and in fact they're adapted to be able to take in water and nutrients that way, but you just have to be very careful when you do it and how you do it. Okay, next up is going to be these two orchids, because oftentimes growers say, well, when I repot a Phalaenopsis, can I bury those aerial roots? Well, you can try, but my experience has been that those roots that have been aerial roots for a longer period of time will fail if you try to push them down into the media. And these two orchids were repotted. I did a video of it several weeks ago, and this one had a good root system down inside the media, and now that it has been repotted, you can still see that those roots are green and they're doing fine. Whereas this orchid had lost its root system in the media, and all that was supporting it was the aerial roots that were above the media. And when I repotted it, I put those aerial roots down inside the media, knowing that they would probably fail. And you can see that that root has not survived. And there's a little bit more indication right here of roots that have not survived since this orchid has been repotted. So this one is going to struggle a bit more because those aerial roots were not adapted to the media. They were put inside the bark, and so now they are just dying because, you know, they just are protesting having to grow down inside the media after having been aerial roots for so long. So I'm expecting this orchid to thrive much better than this one. This one will have a bit of a setback. Okay, and then finally, this orchid. I've had this Phalaenopsis in my collection for about 5 or 6 years. It was actually one of my first Phalaenopsis, and early on it didn't really have very many aerial roots. And upon a bit more investigation, I noticed that the roots inside the media were dying. They were no longer thriving. And in order to compensate for that, this orchid was beginning to put out multiple aerial roots in every joint of the orchid. And I had to do kind of an emergency repot. I had to rehydrate the orchid as best I could, put it in fresh media. And you can still tell that the root system inside the pot is not all that great, and it still has all of these aerial roots. So the way that I have been maintaining this one is with very careful misting, because the root system inside the pot is not really able to support this big plant, and the only way this plant can get water and nutrients is through these aerial roots. So at some point, I'm hoping that I can redevelop the root system here, but in the meantime, I have to take care of this orchid just a bit differently. So hopefully that will answer most of the questions that you might have about what to do with aerial roots on Phalaenopsis orchids. If you learned something new or like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and the subscribe button will be in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Just remember, every orchid is an individual. Whether it has aerial roots or not, it's not right or wrong. It's just the way the orchid is. And ask yourself, how many Phalaenopsis orchids does one grower actually need? Talk to you next time. New roots at the base of the plant growing close to the media can actually be trained to go into the media. Watch that video here.